My daddy's making me smoke marijuana, take LSD, and I want to go home.
Felix had a wife who had drowned.
She threw out a machete, and I'm like, what in the world have I gotten myself into?
Abduction, manipulation, religious cults, and a twisted serial killer. The story of how one woman solved a 50-year-old murder case will shock you.
You didn't worry about the risks.
I don't worry about the risk. I just wanted to know the truth.
Mary Rose Craver's life was turned upside down when her husband passed away unexpectedly in 1981. Her 15-year-old daughter, Annette, struggled with her father's passing and soon began spending time with 40-year-old Felix Vail.
She did mention in letters that Felix stopped by, but I didn't know that there was intimacy.
Struggling financially with the loss of her husband, Mary Rose was forced to relocate from her hometown of Houston, leaving her daughter in the care of a friend so she could finish high school.
I regret that I left, and she even said to me in a letter, I feel like you abandoned me.
Without her mother knowing, Annette began spending more and more time with the mysterious man. While Mary saved money for a house so she and Annette could be back together, Felix began to manipulate her daughter more and more. After saving up enough money, Mary Rose returned to Houston to give her daughter the good news. But when she arrived, Annette was gone. She and Felix had begun traveling around the country. Apart from the occasional letter, Annette had no contact with her mother for an entire year, until finally Mary Rose received the dreaded call from Annette, asking for her approval to marry Felix.
I said, why don't you wait till you turn 18? This is a big mistake. She said, I love you, Mom, and we'll go to Mexico and get married.
Faced with a difficult choice, Annette's mother made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life.
I don't want to estrange her from me, and I trusted her, and I didn't know he was a bad guy. So I fell for it.
Mary Rose gave Annette her blessing, but after their marriage, Annette told Mary Rose that Felix's behavior had changed. He became controlling and manipulative, and even forced her to get an illegal abortion after becoming pregnant. Annette found the courage to escape Felix and return home, but she seemed changed by the experience.
But she was not herself. She was so confused.
Felix soon arrived at the house, demanding to talk to Annette. Mary Rose allowed Felix in to speak to Annette, giving him more than enough time to manipulate her.
He spent some time with her alone, and then they approached me and said, we want you out of the house.
Because Annette owned half of the property, Mary Rose was forced to move out. Not long after, Annette gave all of her inheritance to Felix, including the house. Mary Rose was furious and called Felix to confront him.
What he told me was that he put her on a bus and that she was going to Mexico. I hung up and called the police and filed a missing persons report.
Annette was gone, but police believed Felix's story. For 7 years, Mary Rose desperately searched for her daughter, but there was no news from anywhere.
Yes, I wanted to believe she was alive. I waited and waited. I sat by the phone and I kept waiting.
Running out of options, Mary Rose eventually tracked down Felix's sister, who told her the news that changed everything.
She told me that Felix had a wife who had drowned.
Without help from the police, Mary Rose continued to investigate herself. She tracked down the family of Felix's former wife, Mary, whose brother told Mary Rose that none of them had ever trusted Felix.
Did he think that his brother-in-law had killed his sister?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And so did his parents.
The couple had a baby together named Bill, but Felix's behavior changed dramatically after his birth.
My sister radiated over that baby. This was part of the dream.
He became controlling and told her that he resented having a child. When she got pregnant again, a huge argument ensued, with Mary running back to her family for advice.
My mom suggested that she go back and try to work things out, and then they would have another conversation. She died before there was another conversation.
Not long after returning, Mary died after reportedly falling from a boat during a fishing trip with Felix. Her body was found 2 days later, gagged with a scarf and with a large open wound on the back of the head. Felix was immediately arrested. Despite the evidence, however, the coroner reported the death to be accidental drowning, and Felix was released. Mary Rose was now certain that Felix was behind Annette's disappearance. She continued to dig for evidence and was shocked when Mary's brother told her about another of Felix's former girlfriends who had disappeared.
Her mother called for years, wondering if anyone had seen Sharon. When she told me that, my ears perked up. I thought, oh my gosh, now I've got something to work with.
Sharon Hansley had dated Felix after Mary's death, so Mary Rose traveled across the country to meet with her brother. He told her that Sharon and Felix had met in the 60s in California. Both had adopted a hippie lifestyle and had traveled across the country together.
They were living from vineyard to vineyard, living on grapes and kind of freewheeling around.
Felix became a preacher, briefly joining a strange mystic school named the Holy Order of Mans. Felix was taking a lot of drugs while still caring for he and Mary's son, Bill. With increased drug use came increased violence, but Sharon's family believed she was too scared to leave him. Sharon called her family around this time to explain that she was going to South America with Felix. It was the last time her family ever heard from her.
When my mom got off the phone, she told my dad, Sharon's in deep trouble. She's crying out for help.
The only news they ever received about Sharon came from Felix, who told them she had left him to go to Australia with a group of strangers. Around this time, Bill ran away from his father's care, arriving at a police station barefoot, aged just 8 years old.
My daddy's making me smoke marijuana, and he'd take LSD, and I want to go home.
Knowing that Sharon and Annette would be impossible to find, Mary Rose tracked down Bill, one of the only people who knew Felix well. Bill was now an adult who was married with a family of his own. Regardless of this, he shared shocking information with Mary Rose that reignited her investigation once more. While dying of cancer, Bill recorded his testimony for Mary Rose in 2008.
He told her that he had murdered my mother. And I heard the girlfriend saying, "Oh, I know you must just feel responsible for it. You know, you just feel responsible." He said, "No, you don't understand. I really did kill her."
Bill saw his father once more when he was 13, but Sharon was nowhere to be seen. When he asked Felix about it, he said that she would never bother anyone ever again.
I knew what that meant. There was nothing I could do with his information.
Bill died of cancer in 2009, but Mary Rose took all of the information he gave her to the FBI. Despite witness statements from numerous people and 3 potential victims, the FBI refused to reopen the case. Desperate for help, Mary Rose turned to investigative journalist Jerry Mitchell. She told him everything about the case, and he agreed to help her.
She said, I'm coming down to confront Felix. I said, well, I want to go with you.
30 years after Annette's disappearance, Mary Rose and Jerry visited Felix's home in a Mississippi trailer park. But Felix was nowhere to be seen, so at 64 years old, Mary Rose decided to break in.
She gets over there, and the back window was missing, so she crawled inside.
You didn't worry about the risks.
I don't worry about the risk. I just wanted to know the truth.
Inside, Mary Rose found a large haul of weapons, religious texts, and numerous journals. Felix had written about how he would control women and even expressed how he liked to drink raw blood, but there was no information about the murders. After Mary Rose crawled out of the house, the pair were confronted by Felix's sister who lived nearby. She was initially furious at them until they explained why they were there.
When I spoke to Kate Faulkner, Felix Vail's sister, she's like, oh yeah, I think he killed these women.
Mary Rose and Jerry worked together to gather all the information collected over the past 30 years and release it as a book. It was a success, and the FBI were forced to reopen the investigation. The only murder that could be confirmed, however, was Mary's, so the police focused on her death. By some miracle, police managed to find photos of Mary's body after 50 years by tracking down a 90-year-old man who helped pull her body from the water. It was clear on first glance of the photos that Mary's death was no accident.
The forensic pathologist just happens to be walking past the table. He looks down at the pictures. He said, who murdered her?
After 5 decades, Felix was charged in 2014 for the murder of his first wife, Mary, in 1962. Members of all 3 families testified against him, and after just 10 minutes of deliberation, the jury found the 74-year-old guilty of murder.
When they said guilty, really no words to describe it. It just felt so good that finally, mission accomplished.
Despite never being able to prove that Felix killed Annette and Sharon, the 2 women's families could be happy to know that Felix would die in prison.
This was it. He was never going to get out of jail.
Thanks for watching.